Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for joining what is the last study circle of the academic year. Honestly, we thank you deeply from the bottom of our hearts for turning up for all the other study circles that were online, all the brother study circles and the sisters halaqas that took place during the academic year. It means a lot that you guys actually turned up. So, without further ado, I think I'll hand over to Abdus-Saalaam in a minute. Today, it's just going to be a bit of a recap over what happened over the past 3 weeks, as well as open Q&A. Again, any questions, you can send them in the chat, as well as the question link, inshallah. That's enough from me. Over to you, Abdus-Saalaam.
Okay. So you can hear me, right? Just to confirm.
Yep, I can hear you. Good.
Okay, Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So yes, as he has said, this is our final session. It's mainly going to be a recap, revisiting everything that we've already talked about, then also a small reminder and an open Q&A as well, inshallah. So if you have any questions, ideally about fasting, please do send in your questions and I'll be very happy to answer them. But I am going to start with something that happened last week. And last week I spoke about how in Salah, it is only permissible for you to make du'as that are either mentioned in the Quran or mentioned from Rasulullah in the Hanafi madhab. Now, there were a few people who were slightly unsure about this and they wanted a reference, so that's perfectly fine. You can ask for any references from anything that I have said. So the reference, the book that I mentioned is this book called Al-Fiqh ala al-Madhahib al-Arba'a. It's in 4 volumes, and on page 210, Fahad, if you can please put it up there. Is it up?
Yep, it's up.
I can't seem to see, it's okay. I can't see it, but should be able to see it over there. Okay, so if you guys can see it, I can't see it, but there should be a few words that are highlighted. And under the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, it says over there that لا يجوز له أن يدعو بما يشبه كلام الناس, that it is not permissible. This lam is for lam tahrim. It is not permissible for someone to say a dua that resembles the dua of or the words of the people. Now, anything that is not the word of Allah, or anything that is not the word of Rasulullah, it comes under yushbihu kalamun nas. And therefore, from this, we learn that the dua that can only be made in Salah, in the opinion of Abu Hanifa, is that which is either mentioned in the Quran or mentioned in Al-Ad'iyat al-Ma'thura from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in the opinion of the other fuqaha, they've allowed this. And Abu Hanifa, he gives a few examples as well. The Musannif of this book, he gives a few examples of the du'as that we cannot make in sujood or in the final sitting. And if you see, it says, Allahumma zawijni fulana. That's a dua that you cannot make. Allah, give me so-and-so as a partner. Or a'tini kadha min al-dhahab wal-fidda. So these are du'as that you cannot make in Salah, in the opinion of Abu Hanifa. But as far as the other schools are concerned, they do allow this. And although the other schools, the Shawafi', the Hanbaliya, Malikiyya, they allow that you make du'as outside of the Quran and Hadith in Salah, but all of them they do agree on the fact that it would be better, it would be afdal that you mention a dua that is mentioned in the Quran or in the Hadith. So I hope that is clear as far as dua is concerned. Okay. All the questions have started now. Can we make dua after Fard Salah? Raise our hands and make dua. Yes, you can. In a hadith in Sahih Muslim, Sayyida Aisha says that after Fard Salah, you should say Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam aw miqdarihi. That is a hadith in Sahih Muslim, so yes, you can make dua immediately after Salah. Okay, now coming back to the fiqh of fasting and just what we've essentially covered in the past 3 weeks. So a lot of this stuff is something that you've obviously heard from me. So there are 4 types of fasts that are obligatory. Okay, the first type of fast that is obligatory is the fasting of Ramadan. Do you have some questions? Okay, the first type of fast that is obligatory is the fast of Ramadan. The second type of fast that is obligatory is the make-up fasts. So you miss a fast, making that up is also obligatory. The other type of fasts that are obligatory is kafara, expiation, penalty fasts. That is also a fast that is obligatory. And the fourth fast is the fasting of vows. What that basically means, it used to happen a lot before, it doesn't happen now. Many times people would say that, oh Allah, if so-and-so happens, or if this thing happens as I want it, as an act of gratitude, I will keep 10 fasts. So that is a promise. And if that thing which you made dua for, if that materializes, then you have to fulfill that promise because you've already made an intention. So that is the fasting of vows. So these are the 4 types of obligatory fasts. Now, who is fasting obligated upon? Now, there's some basics. Muslim, he must be sane, but he must be a baligh. That's a fiqh term for someone who passes the age of puberty. Now, the thing to remember over here is that being baligh has nothing to do with age, right? It's not linked to any age number. Depending on what part of the world you live in, your diets, to an extent, even genetics, that is what determines what age you become a baligh. So in some parts of the world, people become baligh earlier, and other parts, people become later in third world countries. But there are some basic signs, and if you witness any one of these signs, then you would be considered a baligh, mature person. And the most common one is a nocturnal dream. For women, it is if you witness a month of menses, bleeding, that would indicate that you've entered the age of bulugh. But if you don't see any of these signs, then the age of 15, and these are lunar years, if you cross the age of 15, then automatically you assume that title of a baligh. So that's something to bear in mind. Okay, so who's exempted from fasting? Now, the traveler, a musafir, is exempted from fasting. He doesn't have to fast. But there's some detail to this, and that is, for a traveler to be exempted from fasting, his journey must start before the time of Fajr of that day. So my journey must start before Fajr, before the fast officially starts, for me to be exempted from fasting. If I start to travel at 10 a.m. in the morning, then I will have to keep a fast. This concession only extends to those whose travel starts before the time of the fast starts. Now, let's assume that this is a concession that Allah has given to you in the Quran. That is why the Hanafi fuqaha say that you must, if you're traveling, then you must not fast, because this is a concession which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you and you should take it. But assume you don't fast. Assume that you do fast. So despite traveling, assume that you decide that I am going to fast. And once you start the journey, midway, you realize that fasting is too much for you. and then you intentionally break the fast after intending to fast on a journey. Now, what is the point to remember over here is that if a traveler breaks his fast intentionally, he will only have to make up the fast. He won't have to pay a kafara, the expiation penalty. And the reason is that, if you intentionally break a fast, you know that you have to not only make up the fast, but you have to pay. So you have to pay a penalty, and you have to make up the fast if you break a fast intentionally. But for a traveler, because he wasn't obligated to fast in the first place, if he breaks the fast in Ramadan, he will simply have to make up the fast, no penalty. So that is one thing to remember. The other type of people that are exempted from fasting are those who are seriously ill. Now, you see, if you feel that fasting is going to pose a very serious risk to your health, it is better for you not to fast. Or if a doctor tells you that you should not fast. Now, in the books of fiqh, the fuqaha say that it should be ideally from a Muslim doctor. Now, the reason why they say that on the advice of a Muslim doctor is because many non-Muslims do not understand the seriousness of fasting. So even if it is a trivial matter, they would say, oh, it's better for you not to fast. But when it comes to fasting, it has to be a very serious illness that prevents you from fasting. Therefore, Muslim doctors are in a better position to give you that advice. But if it is a non-Muslim doctor, just go and tell him that this is my situation. Only compelling illnesses exempt me from fasting. And then if that non-Muslim doctor says you should not fast, then it is okay for you to miss the fasting. Now, one thing that is also worth remembering is if fasting poses a very serious risk to your life. So if you know that if I fast, okay, there is a chance of me to die. There is a chance that I could die. In this circumstance, it is haram for you to fast. And if you are in the state of fasting, you must immediately break your fast. To continue that fast is haram for you if there is a risk to your life. Sometimes, piety dictates that, oh, whatever happens, I'm going to fast. That's not the way to do. That's in fact the opposite to piety. And instead of gaining any rewards for fasting, you're only bringing more sin to yourself. Because the deen and the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are not here to kill you, okay? And essentially the sanctity or the value of human life, it supersedes these ahkam. That takes priority. Life takes priority first. So the seriously ill are exempted from fasting. Now, the children are also, exempted from fasting. But there's one detail over here, and that is, if a child, say an 8-year-old, decides to fast, and then midway he breaks the fast. Now, he's made the intention to fast, but he breaks the fast. Now, does a child have to make it up? And the answer to that is, he doesn't have to make it up. And even though he has intentionally broken the fast, of course, there won't be any expiation that he has to do. And the reason is that because he was a child, fasting wasn't obligatory upon him. And because it wasn't obligatory upon him, making it up, kafara, that by default would be waived off. So that is as far as children are concerned. Now, the most important precondition to salah, right, is intention, niyyah. Without intention, you have no fast. Let's be very clear about that. But there is a difference amongst the schools regarding when you have to make the intention. So it's worth remembering. I may have mentioned this. If not, I'll repeat it now. Now, in the Hanafi madhab, you have all the way up till Zawal al-Shams, and that is just as the time of Zuhr starts, right? So when the sun passes the zenith point, that is known as Zawal al-Shams. A person has all the time until Zawal al-Shams to make the intention to fast. So for instance, waking up for suhoor is mustahab. Assume that I don't wake up for suhoor and I didn't intend to fast as well the night before. I wake up at 10 a.m. and I realize that I didn't eat anything for suhoor, but I didn't, most importantly, make any intention to fast the following day. In the Hanafi opinion, so Zawal al-Shams, I think today in this would be around 12:30, let's assume. So in the Hanafi opinion, I have up till 12:30 p.m. to make the intention to fast, given that I haven't done anything that would nullify the fast. So if I wake up at 10 a.m., I haven't eaten or I haven't drunk anything, or I haven't done anything that would invalidate the fast, I have up till the time of Zuhr to make the intention to fast, and I can make the intention and the fast will be fine. This is for Ramadan. But what is good to know that this is the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. According to the Shawafi', it is important that you make the intention for fasting the night before. What it means by the night before is before the time of Fajr starts, you make the intention. Okay, so before the time of the fasting starts, the intention has to be made at that time. If the fast starts, the time of the fast starts, then you can't make the intention to fast. It has to be made the night before. That is some difference when it comes to the timing and the timing of the intentions. That is worth bearing in mind. Waking up for suhoor is mustahab, but if you don't, then of course you can still fast. Now, there are three ways of fast can be broken. And essentially, every other form of breaking the fast can be linked back to this. It can be brought back to this. Now, the first way a fast can be broken is that something enters the body via the orthodox passages that I mentioned in detail as well. The orthodox passages are four, right? The eyes, the nose, the mouth, obviously, and the back passage, according to most scholars. So if anything enters the body via these passages, the fast is broken. Anything that enters the body outside of these four passages wouldn't break the fast. So you have injections, dental injections, insulin, drips, all of these would come under the unorthodox passages of entering the body. It would not break the fast. The thing to bear in mind over here is that if you try and cheat the system or try and play around the system and say, okay, I won't enter anything, nothing will enter my body via these four orthodox passages, but I'll take non-essential injections as a direct alternative to food and water, and I'll just inject them in my arm or anywhere else. So if those injections are for nourishment purposes, as an alternative to not eating and drinking, then that would break the fast. So the injections that you do take, make sure that it is for medical purposes and not for nourishment purposes. So that's the first thing, right? Something that enters the body via the four orthodox passages. The second one is vomiting full mouth. Now, what it means by vomiting full mouth is that the vomit comes out with such force that it is not stoppable. So I can't really control the vomiting that comes out. So that would qualify as that would break the fast. That would qualify as vomiting full mouth. Or if I intentionally cause myself to vomit. These are the two instances where the fast would also be broken. The third possible way of breaking a fast is when you intentionally bring impurity upon yourself. There is a difference, and I really want to stress on this difference. There is one thing where ghusl becomes wajib upon you. There is another thing when you make ghusl wajib upon yourself. There is one thing where you impose pure impurity on yourself, or where you become impure. An example of that would be that after Dhuhr, if you go to sleep and you experience a nocturnal dream, now you've become impure. Ghusl has become wajib upon you, but you essentially had no control over that. Okay? That was something which was outside of your control. Therefore, ghusl became wajib upon you. You didn't make ghusl wajib upon yourself. In that instance, you would not have to. Your fast would be completely unaffected. You should continue to fast. The other scenarios where you intentionally make ghusl wajib upon yourself is if you intentionally ejaculate or you engage in sexual activity intentionally. Okay, so there's a question. Okay, that's a little explicit, but I'm happy to talk about that. I'm happy to answer that question. So I did mention that masturbation will break the fast. The reason is because that was a conscious decision that you made yourself. Now, if someone breaks his fast intentionally by way of masturbation, as you said, it will only require a makeup. It will not require a penalty. So there will be no kafara. You won't have to pay the expiation, the penalty. The reason is that kafara is only when the fast is broken explicitly by sexual intercourse. So if there is anything less than sexual intercourse, whether you ejaculate or not, that would only necessitate a makeup. You would only have to make up the fast. There would be no punishment. There would be no kafara. The kafara penalty is only for those who break the fast in Ramadan by way of sexual intercourse. So I hope that does answer your question. So yeah, those are the three things that would break the fast. Everything else can essentially be linked back to these three things. So if you've this is now coming on to what we discussed in the second week. So if you've missed a fast in Ramadan, there's essentially three things that can happen, and I'll introduce or essentially reintroduce these terms to you. One is qada. Qada, another word for that is i'ada. It quite literally means to bring back or to make up something, where you have to make up a fast. The other term is kafara, an expiation, a penalty. Now we know what the penalty is, right? You first free a slave, because the idea of slaves no longer exists. That would be cancelled out. And the next thing to do is you feed 60 people. If you can't feed 60 people, then you free a slave. If not, you fast for 60 days uninterrupted. And if you can't fast for 60 days uninterrupted due to medical reasons, then you feed 60 people. This is kafara, penalty. The third thing is fidya. Fidya is quite simply a compensation for missed fasts for someone who has underlying long-term health conditions. Fidya cannot be given. Yeah, you can send it anytime, it's fine. Okay, so fidya, remember, is only for those people who suffer from chronic illnesses, underlying health conditions, and they will never recover from that illness. Only them sorts of people are allowed to pay a compensation for missing some fasts. So I'll try and mention a few things, or rather a few scenarios, and I'll try and assign what that person would do. So if someone intentionally breaks the fast in Ramadan, okay, he will not only have to make up the fast, but he will also have to pay a penalty, a kafara. The reason for that is he has committed two sins. I mentioned that. One is breaking of the fast, so he's making up for that. But the other thing is that he's violated the sanctity of the month of Ramadan. Therefore, as a punishment for doing that, he is told that you must pay a kafara. And the other thing is, of course, fidya. The thing to remember with fidya is that if due to a chronic illness you've missed 10 fasts, you would only have to feed 10 people. Okay, so it's feeding one person for 2 meals per fast that you've missed. So if you've missed 20 fasts and it was a long-term illness, but because it's a long-term illness, usually it would always be 30, right? It's an illness that you would never recover from. So 30 fasts, and then you would have to feed 30 people for 2 meals a day. What you can do is, instead of feeding 30 people for 2 meals a day, you can feed 60 people 1 meal a day. Or you could feed 15 people, but then feed them for 4 meals, so for 2 days. It's not essential that if you're giving a kafara penalty, it's not essential that it's 60 people. It could essentially be one needy person that you feed for 60 days. The point is that 60 people are fed. And if it's not 60 people, it's one needy person, but so long as it is 120 meals. Okay, so we have some questions. Okay, so some of those questions. Now, there are 4 potential reasons. I mentioned this as well. There are 4 potential reasons behind someone breaking a fast. Okay, the first one is when he intentionally breaks a fast. The other is where you genuinely forget that you are fasting. So if I wake up and I completely forget that I'm meant to be fasting and I drink water, then because that was due to forgetfulness, the fast will be unaffected. And this is in fact based upon a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said to someone, so a companion came and he said, I accidentally drank water. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah caused this forgetfulness, therefore you continue your fast. But then there's a third type, and that is, it's a genuine mistake, as in you didn't intend to eat something, but you knew that you were fasting. Now, I'll create a scenario, is that if I'm going to make wudu, and when it comes to inserting water inside my mouth, I know that I'm in the state of fasting, but when I insert water inside my mouth, there are a few droplets that go down my throat. This is known as khata fi as-sawm, right? It is a genuine mistake. I didn't intend for water to go down my throat. But because I knew that I was fasting, I didn't forget that I was fasting. I was conscious of the fact that I am fasting. The fast will break. Similarly, if someone makes a mistake as to when the fast is to open. So if I think that the fast is going to open at 8:30, and when 8:30 the time arrives, I open the fast. But later I realized that I made a mistake and the fast was meant to open at 8:40. Although I didn't intentionally break the fast, it was a mistake. But because I knew, I was conscious of the fact that I was in the state of fasting, it will break. I will have to repeat it, but there will be no kafara. So it's essentially trying to distinguish between these two things. When you are completely unaware, or you genuinely forget that you are in the state of fasting, that will not break the fast. If you do anything, not knowing that you are fasting. But if you make a mistake, an unintended mistake, knowing that you are in the state of fasting, then that will break the fast. So that's one answer to that question. Okay, one question is, I have missed many fasts in Ramadan over the years due to my period menses. I have not made them up. What do I have to do? So this question. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to try and figure out how many fasts you have missed. And however many fasts you have missed, you need to try and make them up as you go along. Missed fasts are not pardoned. Just like missed salawat are not pardoned, you have to make them up. And what my advice would be is that you have optional fasts, like you fast on on Thursdays or on Mondays. So use this time to make up qada fasts. So use these days to fast, and then it's going to take a long while, but try and have a rough estimate of how many fasts I've missed. So if it's 100 fasts, try and fast one make-up fast every single week, and then eventually this process will continue. So that's the answer to that. Another question: will it be okay to intend to fast the entire Ramadan rather than intending before each night? So there is only one qawl in the Hanbali madhab where it is said that you can make a collective intention. So at the start of Ramadan, I can make a collective intention and say, I am fasting I intend to fast the entire month of Ramadan. That one intention will suffice. That's one qawl. That's not the mukhtar qawl, that is one qawl. But the general understanding is that you have to make a new intention for each fast. One thing that I did mention in the first week, and I'll mention it again, the place of intention is the heart, right? So when you wake up for suhoor and you are eating, you are essentially eating with the intention of fasting tomorrow, right? So that eating in of itself is an intention. Do not worry too much about saying something with your tongue. You don't have to say something to make an intention. It is inside the heart. So if I'm just eating, and I know in my heart that I'm eating obviously because I'm going to fast tomorrow, that's enough of an intention. A lot of the time what people worry is, I didn't say I will be صوم غد نويت من شهر رمضان or any other thing like that. I didn't say this, therefore my intention, it must not have been done. So don't worry about that. Often the other example that I give with salat is, if I'm, niyyah in salat is also a condition. Intention has to be made before a salat. So if I'm going to the masjid and I'm going with the intention of praying Asr, that's okay. That's the intention done, because that's the sole reason why I'm going to the masjid. So yeah, don't worry too much about verbalizing intentions. It's fine. But there's no doubt about it that it is better for someone to verbalize the intention, because it brings that element of assurity. That's all. Okay, there's a few questions over here. Does the forgetfulness idea also apply to putting eye drops? If someone cannot remember if they accidentally put eye drops in out of habit, if the fast is invalid, should they make it up just in case? Okay, so Nessie or forgetfulness will absolutely extend to that scenario which you have mentioned. The most important thing is that you, at the time of placing those eye drops, you were unaware of the fact that you were fasting. Okay? And if that is what happened, it's fine. Continue with your fast, and you don't have to make it up. Yeah, there's no obligation for you to make it up. Okay, there's one question here. To make the intention to fast, do you have to utter the dua, or can you simply have the desire to fast the next day? I've answered that question before. Can you go over the signs of puberty again? Would the breaking of the voice be classed as a sign? Okay, so the signs of puberty in Quduri and in Hidayah, there's 7 particular signs that are mentioned. And the signs that I mentioned were the most prominent ones, okay? So with the men, it is if they have facial hair, or if there is hair that grows in the other part of their body, that would also be a sign of puberty. The breaking of the voice, according to many, is not a sign of puberty. Do inhalers break the fast? Yes, inhalers do break the fast, because it is something that is going inside the body, albeit particles, via the orthodox passage. Is there a question over here as well? Okay, Abdulahad, you say, why do eye drops invalidate a fast whilst contact lenses do not? Okay, so the Musannif of Hidayah, when he mentions this, the eyes, the nose, and well, according to him, the ears, and I've mentioned why. Go back to the second session at the very start. I mentioned why the ear drops do not break the fast and the eye drops do break the fast. But one of the conditions is salahul badan, that when you enter something inside your eye, or when something goes inside your nose, it is with the intention of improving the state of the body. Therefore, with contact lenses, you don't find that illah, but also with contact lenses, there's nothing that goes via the eye down to the body. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Although the eye isn't a medically utilized passage, but we do know that it is indeed a passage into the body. So do you have your answer, Abdul Ahad? Is student loan haram as it is interest-based loans? That's a very long question. I'll try and give a very simple answer. You see, student loan in principle is haram because you have the element of riba inside it. However, we do know that sometimes necessity does cancel out prohibition. So something that was haram before, because of necessity, it becomes permissible. That's the thing that you need to remember here. Now, where the scholars do differ is going to university a necessity? That's essentially where the argument is. And there's different levels of necessity. The first type of necessity is where if you don't have that thing, essentially you can't live. Your life will be extremely more difficult. The example of that is food. So if I don't eat, I am going to die. And therefore, if I find something, if I'm starving and there's nothing there, if I find something that is haram, I'm allowed to eat it because it's a necessity. Similarly with houses, homes are a necessity, therefore interest-based mortgages are allowed. The issue with student loans is going to university a necessity? And there's two branches of thought over here. One say that in order to survive and essentially propel in the society that we live in, going to university, if you didn't go to university, we wouldn't have doctors, we wouldn't have nurses, we wouldn't have engineers. So many professions depend on going to university. Even though it isn't a question of life and death, if I don't go to university, I'm pretty sure I'd still live a pretty decent, hopefully, life. So even though it isn't a question of life and death, the thing to remember here is that to survive and to live comfortably in this society, it is important to pursue higher education. Based on that, the scholars, or one branch of scholars, have allowed student loans. The thing to remember over here is, and it's a very important thing to remember, if you do, the first thing that you should do is explore every possible avenue of funding that may be available to you. So I need to look at my family situation and see, is it possible that maybe my parents or my mother or some of my brothers may be able to finance my studies? I have to explore every possible avenue. Are there any scholarships out there that I could possibly apply for that will pay for my student loans? Once I have explored every possible avenue and there is no other option except to take student loans, only then should you face or choose that option. If you are living at home, or if you have the ability to work, then there is no reason why you should be claiming anything other than the loan that covers your tuition fees. So the government does also give maintenance loan and other forms of loans as well. So if I'm living at home, I'm not paying rent, then that would be impermissible for me to claim. However, if that loan is essential for me to buy books and other things, and I feel that without that loan I can't really study at university properly, only then would it be permissible to claim maintenance loan. So because it's riba-based money, be extremely cautious with claiming only that money which is absolutely necessary, not claiming that money which you are eligible for. So I hope that answers the question. If you have missed Salah to make up, would it be better to make those up in Ramadan instead of Taraweeh? That's actually a good question. If you have missed Salah, so I did mention a qawl from Fatawa Sham, where the Musannif said that the status of optional fasts, the status of make-up fasts, the status of qada fasts, and the status of qada salah is greater than optional salawat and optional fasts. What he means is, it is better to prioritize your missed fasts and your missed salawat instead of engaging in optional acts of worship. So you have the 15 fast of Sha'ban. We know that there are so many ahadith where the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned how virtuous it is to fast in Sha'ban. But because I have missed fasts, it would be better for me to make up those missed fasts instead of fasting the fast of Sha'ban, because they are indeed optional. The question about Taraweeh, what I would say about that is Taraweeh is Sunnat Mu'akkada. It's not obligatory, but it is distinctive to the month of Ramadan. So it's essentially an integral part of Ramadan. So my advice would be that when it comes to pray Taraweeh, and because there's that element of urf and customs as well, so yeah, pray Taraweeh, but when it comes to other optional salawat, then use that time to pray your missed salawat. Can you give zakat to a non-Muslim? No, that's something that you learn at the very first day. Zakat isn't given to non-Muslims. Bear that in mind. Okay, so how do you fast for 60 days when menstruating? Can someone answer that question, please? Because I mentioned that quite a few times. Would someone be happy to answer that over there? So if you have a kafara, a penalty, right? And it has to be 60 days back to back, okay? And if there is any interruption in that 60-day period, you have to start again. But remember, I did tell you very clearly in the second session that hayd and nifas, menses or postnatal bleeding, because this udhr is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would not factor this in. So if a woman has entered the kafara period where she's fasting 60 days and she's kept 25 fasts and then her menses have started, she would simply have to see off that period, and once her menses are over, just continue from where she left off from. So after the menses are over, keep another fast, and that would be fast 26 of your 60-day kafara period. I hope that answers the question. Okay, if a woman gets discharged on a regular basis, does she have to do wudu before every salah? Okay, so that question, I haven't covered hayd and nifas because I was meant to recap everything that we've covered. So that question will essentially be answered when I cover the fiqh or the part we talked about menstruation. So if you guys remember, I introduced 3 terms when it came to menstruation. One is hayd, and these are menses, the monthly cycle that a woman undergoes, the cycle of bleeding that a woman undergoes every month. Then the other term is nifas, and that is postnatal bleeding that occurs when a woman gives birth. And then the third term that is important to remember is istihada. This is extended irregular bleeding. Now, the minimum period of menses, in the opinion of Shafi'i, is 1 day and 1 night. And in the opinion of Abu Hanifa, it is 3 days and 3 nights. Now, the maximum period is what? Is, in the opinion of Abu Hanifa, it is 10 days and 10 nights. And in the opinion of Shafi'i, it is 15 days. And the maximum period of postnatal bleeding is 40 days. Now, the colors of hayd are 6 that I've mentioned. And I'm sure some of you guys will remember what colors those are. It's red, dark red, black, green, brown, and yellow. These are colors that constitute the blood of menses and the blood of postnatal bleeding. Now, the things which a woman is not allowed to do in her menses, I mentioned, she's not allowed to pray, she's not allowed to fast, she's not allowed to enter the masjid. Now, one detail that I did give you over here was that if there are classrooms that do not form the immediate vicinity of the masjid, the vicinity of the masjid is the prayer hall. So if there are classrooms that are attached with the masjid, but it's not the prayer hall, a woman in her menses is into those classrooms. She's also allowed to go to the kitchen, the bathroom, anything outside of the immediate core of the masjid, that is the prayer hall. And the same would apply for a Junubi person as well. A woman in her menses is also not allowed to recite the Quran. She is also not allowed to touch the Quran. When it came to the recitation of the Quran, I did mention that the Quran consists of 2 things, words and meaning. And because of the meaning factor, translation and tafsir would come under the same hukam, in my opinion. So just as a woman is not allowed to recite the Quran, she's not allowed to recite or read translations and tafsir, according to this one opinion. Some have given concessions to reading tafsir, given that it doesn't exceed the amount of ayat that are written over there. But women are allowed to listen to the Quran. They're allowed to listen to the tafsir. They're allowed to listen to translation of the Quran. And where do we get this ruling from? It is based on a hadith that is brought to us by Aisha radiallahu anha in Bukhari and Muslim, where she says that when I was in my menses, the Prophet ﷺ would place his head on my laps and he would recite the Quran to me, and I would listen to the Quran that he is reciting. So from that, we have a very clear ruling that women are allowed to listen to the Quran. I did mention, and the details are mentioned in the notes if you refer back to them. I did mention of the opinion of Imam Malik, who says that women are allowed to recite the Quran in the menses, but just not allowed to touch the Quran. Okay, with the bleeding, you see the maximum period I mentioned of menses is 15 days, and the minimum period is 1 day and 1 night. We have something called adat ma'rufa, and that is a habitual cycle, a usual cycle of bleeding that a woman undergoes. So some women have a set amount of days every month that they bleed. So let's assume that a woman bleeds 5 days every month. Now, in one particular month, that bleeding exceeded her usual set cycle. So she bleeded for more than 5 days. So she bleeded on the 6th day and the 7th day. And then there was a period where the blood stopped. Okay, so that what we would call طهر متخلل, a period of brief stoppage of blood. And then the blood stopped for a few days, and then it resumed again. And it resumed, let's assume, on the 12th day. And then it continues from 12, 13, 15, and then it goes on to the 16th day. Now the maximum period of the blood of menses is 15 days. Now, because her bleeding, her discharge has exceeded the maximum period, which was 15 days, there is a doubt. We don't know which blood we should consider as being the blood of menses and which blood we should consider to be the blood of extended istihada, irregular bleeding, because the maximum period, 15 days, has been crossed. Now, because of this doubt, what we would do is that we would go back and we would go back to her usual set of days. So her usual habit was that she would bleed 5 days. So what we would do is we would say that these 5 days were the blood of menses, and any additional bleeding that happened would all fall into the category of istihada, irregular bleeding. So any prayers that she has missed, any fast that she has missed, thinking that this blood is the blood of menses, she will have to make it up. If that bleeding doesn't surpass the maximum period, then it's very easy. We know that because it hasn't exceeded 15 days, all that blood would be considered to be the blood of menses. So I hope that is somewhat clear. Now, when there are two signs that I mentioned that clearly indicate that the menses are over. One was white discharge, and the other one was complete dryness. Now, if a woman sees any one of these two signs, and it indicates that her menses have finished, then there is a minimum of a 15-day period, what we call the period of tuhr, where she will never be in the state of menses. So there is a 15-day minimum period of purity. So what often happens, and I will tell you, is that the woman sees some sign of her menses coming to an end. Then she makes ghusl, and she's now entered that period of purity. But after a few days, she sees some discharge. Maybe blood, it may be brownish discharge or yellowish discharge. Now, it's important to understand, and this is where usually the confusion happens. Once the menses have ceased, you've now entered a minimum 15-day purity period. Therefore, any blood that you see after your menses have ended will not be considered the blood of hayd at all. Now, that blood, with that discharge which happens, it will not prevent you from fasting, praying, and doing all the other things. What you need to do, however, what that blood will do is that it will break your wudu. So, just a few questions over here. Okay, so I'll quickly mention that point. So if a woman sees discharge, any discharge, while she's in that period of purity, all she has to do is she has to make wudu, clean herself, and pray salat. In a hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that once your menses have ended, if you see the blood drip on the prayer mat, you should still continue to pray. So any discharge that happens after the menses, you will absolutely not regard that, and all you will have to do is you will have to make wudu, because that blood would fall into the hukm of urine. So I hope that's answered that question as well. So yeah, before every salah, all you have to do is you have to make wudu if that blood is not the blood of menses or nifas. Okay, we were taught that you can read translation of the Quran on menses, or is this only allowed for teaching and learning purposes? Okay, so there are two opinions over here. One opinion is that tafsir, and this is tafsir, and to an extent, even translation, it is an interpretation of the Quran, it is not the nas of the Quran, and therefore we can't really apply the hukm of the Quran to translation and to tafsir. That is one opinion, but the mukhtar opinion, the major opinion, is that translation and tafsir fall into the meaning of the Quran. And the hukm, just as you would not be allowed to read the Quran, you would not be allowed to read the meaning of the Quran, and translation and tafsir fall under that category. It comes under the category of meaning. So these are two opinions, both are valid opinions, and you can adopt that opinion which that suits you better. Okay, the question: does the time of intention ruling explained also apply to qada and sunnah fasts? That's actually a very good question, whoever asked that. Okay, with the qada and sunnah fasts, the qada fast, even in the opinion of so remember what Abu Hanifa said, right? He said, in Ramadan, you have all the way up till Zawal al-Shams to make the intention. But what Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said was that when it comes to qada fasts, even he holds the opinion that the intention has to be made the night before. Okay, so there is no difference or dispute on the issue when it comes to the intention of qada fast. Everyone agrees, thankfully for once, that the intention has to be made the night before when it comes to qada fasts. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, does saliva or sputum break the fast because we are swallowing something? Okay, so saliva or sputum, which is basically saliva mixed with a mucus cough, this doesn't break the fast, no matter how much you swallow it. The reason why is that the principle was that any external thing, out of body thing that enters the body by way of these four orthodox passages breaks the fast. But because saliva is something that our body produces internally, therefore anything that enters, because the body produces that, it wouldn't be something external. It's not something external. It has to be something external that enters the body via the mouth to break the fast. So saliva wouldn't. But it's worth bearing in mind one point. The question that once came was regarding chewing gum. Now you see, with chewing gum, what we do is that it's essentially in your mouth. There's nothing that it doesn't go down your throat. And the principle was that something that goes inside the mouth doesn't break the fast so long as it doesn't go down the throat. Chewing gum is an external thing that only stays inside the mouth. It doesn't go down the throat. Therefore, some scholars have said that it would be makruh tahrimi to chew gum whilst in the state of fasting, but it wouldn't break the fast. That is, in my opinion, the wrong opinion. And I'll tell you why that isn't the correct opinion. You see, chewing gum, there is some flavor in that, there is some taste in that. So for those of you who do chew gum, you see, when you chew gum, after like 30 minutes, you notice that it becomes tasteless. But when you put the chewing gum fresh in your mouth, what happens is that you can taste something. That chewing gum has a taste. And the principle has always been that dha'iqa, any taste that you sense that goes down your throat, will break the fast. So when you chew gum initially, there will be some liquid, some taste that is combined with the saliva and goes down the throat, and therefore it would absolutely break the fast. Yeah, so that's as far as that is concerned, saliva is concerned. So yes, saliva in of itself would not break the fast, but if there is any external thing that is mixed with saliva and it brings some taste to the saliva and then you swallow it down, it would break the fast. Okay, we have another question over here. Okay, so can we send pictures of food and drink to our friends when they are fasting to annoy them? First of all, please do not be that type of person who does this. Extremely annoying. And the answer to that question is, would it be permissible? Absolutely not. The most lenient opinion on this is that it is makruh tahrimi. And understand why you are not allowed to do this. You see, when it comes to playing cricket or football or any other sport, the reason why the fuqaha say that it is disliked to do that in the state of fasting is because it makes the fast harder than it already is. So when you are engaging in sport, you are essentially wasting a lot of energy, and that energy makes your fast more harder. It essentially weakens your resolve to keep the fast. When you send stupid pictures of, I don't know, drinks or smoothies or whatever that is to your friends, that is exactly what you are doing. You are making the fast more harder for them. You're weakening their resolve, and therefore that would also come under the hukam of makruh tahrimi. Last year, what happened was, I think we had the hottest Ramadan last year. I believe we broke a 2-decade record. So it was very hot, and after Zuhr, someone thought it was a good idea to post a very beautiful smoothie with ice cubes in it and a straw. And he thought it would be a very good idea to send that to all his Muslim followers. And that's very mean, yes, but that is also makruh tahrimi. You are weakening, you are making the fast harder than it already is for the Muslims. So yeah, just don't do that. There's one question about zakat. If I'm in a lot of debt, but I'm also sahib al-nisab, is zakat wajib upon me? The answer is yes. The reason for that is the debts that you have and you are paying monthly installments or weekly installments, after you have paid your debts, if you have enough money that qualifies you as sahib al-nisab, then yes, you would have to give zakat. So once you have paid the money for the debts, the monthly installments, the money that remains, if that is enough to qualify you as sahib al-nisab, then zakat will be wajib upon you. That's an important thing. Malu tijara, so the houses or TV, fridge, this wouldn't constitute, you wouldn't factor this in when you measure or when you try and work out how much money how much wealth you own. The reason why is that isn't malu tijara. But if you do have a few properties beside your house, and you are those are properties that are on rent, and you are gaining an income from those properties and those homes, then the thing that you earn from those properties, that would be counted. You would have to count that in, and you would have to give zakat on that. So just remember that point as well. Okay, so there's a question about the 6 fasts of Shawwal. I'll give some background to that. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that whoever completes the month of Ramadan and then he fasts the 6 fasts of Shawwal, in terms of reward, it will be as though he has fasted the entire year. So there's amazing rewards for that. The question here is that if I've missed a few fasts in Ramadan, can I keep the 6 fasts of Shawwal so I attain the reward? And the answer to that is no, you can't. The reason why you can't is, if you look at the wording of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said whoever completes the month of Ramadan. When he says whoever completes the month of Ramadan, what he means is whoever has completed the entire fasting of that month. And only that person who has completed the entire month, this reward extends only as far as him. So if you've got any missed fasts in Shawwal, don't keep those 6 fasts of Shawwal. Instead, use that time to make up the missed fasts of Ramadan. That extends to everyone. There is a minority opinion, an extremely minority opinion of scholars who say that there is an exception to this rule, and that exception is women who have missed fasts due to their menses. And what they say is that because this udhr was from Allah, this essentially, this bleeding isn't something that they control, it is unfair to deprive them from this reward. And therefore, if you missed any fast due to menses, then you can fast the 6 fasts of Shawwal. And then after the 6th fast of Shawwal, you can then make up the qada. But that is a small opinion, but the mukhtar, the major opinion is that if you missed any fast of Ramadan, the 6th fast of Shawwal, you should not be keeping them, you should be making the fasts up. Yes, Daniel. Okay, there's one question. As I have a short break at work, I sometimes end up missing my sunnahs due to an extended dua. Is this permissible? I need some more detail to this question. You end up missing your sunnahs due to an extended dua that you make in fard salah, or what? If you can tell me a little bit more, I'll be able to answer that. But anyways, I'll try and generically answer that question until any detail comes. And that is, dua in salah, or rather, the status of sunnah salah is greater than the status of making dua. So priority should always be given to the afdal and not to the adna. The afdal is sunan salah. So instead of extending your dua, pray the sunnah salah. That would be better. Okay, there's one question. Should I open the fast before praying Maghrib or after praying Maghrib? There's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think Imam at-Tirmidhi collects this hadith. He says that the Muslim should always delay suhoor as much as possible, and he should hasten when it comes to opening the fast. He should rush towards opening the fast. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said rush towards opening the fast, he doesn't mean open the fast half an hour before its time. What he means is when the time of the fast when the time of iftar takes place, then there should be no unnecessary delay to opening the fast. So, if the fast has opened, if I unnecessarily delay that, it will be makruh, even if it is to pray. So the correct way of doing this is, as soon as the time for the fast has opened, immediately I should open it with the mustahab way, eat a date, drink some water, and then I should pray Maghrib. It shouldn't be that I pray Maghrib and then I open the fast. The first thing that you should do is eat and then pray the Salah. That's the way to do it. Is it obligatory to break the fast if one fears death? Yes, it is absolutely obligatory. And if you keep the fast when there is a fear of death, then you're essentially committing a major sin. Okay, there's one, actually it's a very good question, major props to the person who asked this. The kafara, the penalty, right? The penalty extends to the person who intentionally breaks the fast in the month of Ramadan, right? We know that. But what he's asked is, what if someone doesn't intend to fast intentionally? So if I don't essentially intend to fast, if I don't make the intention to fast, then I haven't broken the fast because there wasn't an intention. So would I still have to pay a kafara, an expiation for that? And the answer to that question is that you wouldn't have to from a fiqh perspective. Expiation or kafara is only for those who break the fast. Because you didn't keep the fast in Ramadan, that is, it's a very big problem that you completely disregarded an obligation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mandated upon you. But the punishment, there is no designated punishment for that in the books of fiqh. That is something which is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as far as kafara is concerned, kafara is only for those who break the fast. If you didn't fast when you should be, there'd be no kafara. I hope that answers the question. Good question, by the way. Okay, praying on an aeroplane. Okay. Praying on an aeroplane. Are we allowed to pray salat on an aeroplane? Okay, so there's two opinions. There's one minority, one majority opinion. And the major opinion is that yes, you can fast and you have to fast on an aeroplane. Now, the problem with fasting on an aeroplane is that it's very difficult to ascertain where the Qibla is. Now, you know we have the conditions of Salat, the Faraid al-Salah. Istiqbal al-Qibla, facing the Qibla is a condition. Qiyam, standing up is a condition. Sujood is a condition. But when you are traveling on an aeroplane, a lot of this isn't possible. A lot of these conditions are not, it's not possible to fulfill them. And the thing to bear in mind is that you try and act upon every condition that is actionable. Okay? So if I'm sitting on the aeroplane and I try to ascertain where the Qibla is and I can't seem to find where the Qibla is. Now, because this condition is not actionable, I can't really find, there's no way of me knowing where the Qibla is, and I've tried to find it, then what I would do is I'd simply pray in any direction. The better thing to do over here is take an educated guess. So if you're flying over a certain country, try and figure out which way Saudi would be. And then just assume, okay, I think to the best of my knowledge, Saudi should be this way because the Middle East is this way or whatever. And then just pray towards that. So take an educated guess. If you can't even take an educated guess, then pray in any direction. Now the other conditions of Salah, the other faraid of Salah, like standing up and making sujood. I know that when it comes to the Saudi Airlines, I know they have a designated prayer space. The Qatar Airways don't. I'm not sure about the other airlines, but most airlines don't have a prayer space. And sometimes there isn't enough space to make sajda. So because that condition, making sajda, is a condition for the validity of Salah, because it isn't actionable, okay, what we would do is we would simply cancel that obligation out and we would only do those things that we can do. So I can stand up, I will stand up. Because I can't make sajda, there's no space to make sajda, I won't make sajda. I will simply be in, I will make the gesture of making sajda. So yeah, that's the answer to that. So yes, you can pray on the aeroplane. What I will say is, actually, I'll give you some advice. It's very good advice and it's worked every single time for me. When you are on an aeroplane, you know where the flight attendants are, the flight crew, where the canteen is. There's plenty of space over there, and if you ask nicely, they will let you pray. And that's what I do, and it's worked every single time for me. So if there's nothing else you take away from this study circle, then just know where to pray next time you are in an aeroplane. At least you've taken something. Some of the later Maliki fuqaha have said that in order for the salah to be valid, it has to be performed on ground, okay? Or you pray it on a place that is attached to the ground. So trains would be okay. It'd be okay to pray in a train because it is touching the ground. But because in the aeroplane we're airborne, the salah wouldn't be valid, but that's later Maliki fuqaha. Passenger planes essentially are a new phenomenon, right? Essentially, maybe I think a century ago it started. So the very earlier fuqaha, Abu Hanifa, Malik, etc., we don't find any discussion on this because it wasn't really a thing back then. So when you are traveling in a car, absolutely you must stop because, you know, with an aeroplane, unless you can make the aeroplane land and then get out and pray and then fly again, unless you can do that, you don't have any option but to pray when the plane is traveling. But in a car, you absolutely can stop, and you should just stop somewhere and then pray the salat. A good thing to remember over here is that shortening the salah, qasr in salah, when you are traveling. So if you are traveling on a journey that is minimum 42 miles, you qualify as a traveler, the fiqh status as a traveler. And then you are allowed to do qasr. You are allowed to shorten the prayers. So in the time of Dhuhr, you are allowed to shorten the prayers, but you are also allowed to combine the prayers, okay? So in the time of Dhuhr, you can pray Dhuhr and Asr, or in the time of Asr, you pray Asr and Dhuhr. So you combine two prayers. But bear in mind, because I know there's a lot of people who take the Hanafi opinion up here. In the Hanafi opinion, you are not allowed to combine two prayers, okay? That is only in the opinion of the other three schools. Now, I'll delve into it a little bit more, why the Ahnaf have that opinion. You see, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he said that in the Quran, Allah says, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا. That indeed prayer has been mandated upon the believers upon fixed times, designated, mawqutan, designated fixed times. So he says from this verse we learn that you cannot pray a prayer outside of its time, because Allah has said that in the Quran. And because this is the nas of the Quran, this is am. And where we learn that the Prophet ﷺ combined prayers, they were from khabar wahid. And what the Ahnaf say is that khabar wahid cannot cancel out dalil qat'i, which is the Quran. But there is a major problem with this opinion that the Ahnaf hold. And there's essentially an inconsistency in this opinion. And that is that even according to the Hanafis, you are allowed to combine prayers in Mina and Muzdalifah. So this am, we've made takhsis to it. And when you make takhsis to an am, it's known as am mutakhassas. And then according to our own very principles, the Hanafi principles, further takhsis can be made to something that is am mutakhassas based on khabar wahid or dalil dhanni. And we accept that the combining of prayers is established from khabar wahid. And therefore, if we were to follow that procedure, the combining of the prayers should be allowed. So there is that inconsistency, in my opinion, in the Hanafi opinion. So personally, I'm not exactly sure that I do take that Hanafi opinion, even though I am a Hanafi. So that's as far as that is concerned. But the thing to remember with the four schools is, it brings to mind a beautiful saying where it is said that al-madahib al-arba'a ka-jidran al-Ka'bah, that the four schools, the four madhabs are like the four walls of the Kaaba. إِلَىٰ أَيِّ جِدَارٍ صَلَّيْتَ فَصَلَاتُكَ صَحِيحَةٌ. Whichever wall you pray towards, your salat is perfectly fine. So when you are facing the Kaaba, whichever direction you are facing the Kaaba, your salah is going to be valid. Just like that, the four schools are the same. Whichever opinion you take, it will be valid. It's not about one school being incorrect, the other being correct. It's just a difference in interpretation. Okay, there's one question about nail polish. I think we'll take a few more questions and then bring things to an end. There is one question about nail polish. What if we make wudu with nail polish? Now, you see, with nail polish, this question was asked last year, and I just had no clue what nail polish was. I knew that it goes on your nails, but that's the only thing I knew about it. But I knew the basic principle, and that was when you pour water on your arms and your hands, there should not be anything that prevents water from reaching the base, the foundation of your hand or any other parts that you are meant to wash. That is the principle, okay? There should be, so essentially if I take, a piece of cloth, and that piece of cloth prevents the water from reaching the base, the bottom of my skin, then the wudu would not be valid. So when it came to nail polish, my sister was wearing nail polish. So what I did was I actually went and I tried to scrub it and scratch it off. And I realized that there was almost a layer of nail polish. and that layer could literally could be peeled off. And that is when I ascertained that you could not make wudu with nail polish, because it forms a layer over the nail, and that layer prevents water from reaching the bottom of the nail. So therefore, if you made any wudu with nail polish, that wudu would not count. And if you prayed any salah on the back of that wudu, you'd have to repeat the salah as well. So be cautious with that as well. Okay, so how much should men and women cover in salah? Can we recite using a mushaf when praying tarawih? Okay, so the first question when it comes to the awra of women in salah, it is from head to toe, and essentially the feet and the ankles. In one opinion, in one Hanafi opinion, that doesn't form the awra. In another opinion, it does form the awra. As for Abdul Ahad's question, can you recite using a mushaf when praying for tarawih? The Ahnaf are more strict with that. We don't allow the picking of a mushaf in the state of salah, but the Shawafi', they do allow that. So if you take the Shafi'i opinion, you would be allowed to pick up a mushaf when praying tarawih. But when you do hold the mushaf, make sure that the adab, its sanctity, its etiquettes are not violated. So when you go into sajda, make sure it doesn't touch the ground. So make sure those elements are taken care of. Okay, do we have any more questions before we bring things to an end? Okay, one question we got, and that is, if I travel from one country to another, then do I keep fasts with them? Do I open the fast with them? Do I celebrate Eid with them? That's also a good question. So just bear in mind that this principle is derived from a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said that start your fasting with the people of the land, open your fasting with the people of the land, and also celebrate Eid with the people of the land. So if I've observed half the month of Ramadan in England, and then I go back home to Kashmir, now I would have to open the fast when they open the fast, and I will have to celebrate Eid whenever they celebrate Eid. So whether that means I've kept 30 fasts or 31 fasts, that doesn't make a difference. The main thing is that whichever place you are in, you open the fast with them. Let's take a better example. Would be that if I've set off to a different country, somewhere within Europe, after 10 o'clock, so I'm not allowed to miss the fast. So when I go to, let's say I go to France or another place where there's a slight change in time zone, and I started the fast based on the timing in England. Now when I land in a different time zone, when I open the fast, it has to be according to their time zone. Whether that means that I fasted for 22 hours, 15 hours, whatever that is, I would have to open the fast not on my original time zone, but in the present time zone. So if I closed the fast at 4 a.m. and in England, the fast was to open at 9 p.m. But now I'm in Spain, right? I've traveled to Spain. Now, because I'm in Spain, I wouldn't open the fast based on the timing in England, although the fast started over here. But whatever the time zone and whenever the fast opens in Spain, I would open it with the Spaniards. So I hope that answers the question as well. Okay, I think that's enough for questions, inshallah. There's just a few reflections, very brief reflections. I'm going to keep it very short. That inshallah I do want to share with you guys before I pass it on to Sister Farhat. And the most important thing that I really want to mention, and I think it's so important that everyone listens to this, we seriously need to change our outlook on what constitutes worship. We have an idea of what constitutes worship. You see, in the present scenario with COVID-19, there's a lot of people who are mourning, who are essentially upset at the fact that they are staying at home, they are bored, whatever. Understand that if you stay at home with the intention of assisting to prevent the spread of this disease, if you stay at home with the intention of preserving human life, because that is exactly what you are doing. When you stay at home, you ensure that the virus doesn't spread. And as a result of the virus not spreading, you're saving human life. If you simply renew and re-navigate your intention of why you are staying at home, that staying at home becomes an act of worship. We somehow assume that there are only certain things that constitute worship. This would also be an act of worship. If you ring a friend just to give him some company because you understand that a lot of people are bored, this would also be an act of worship. Remember, you have to be completely empty, completely void of any basic humanity, any basic human etiquette. If you completely disregard the guidelines that the government has issued, simply because you know that I am young and the chances of me surviving this are very high. And because I am not at risk, I will not uphold these guidelines. You've got to be empty of any humanity to do that. Because everyone knows this isn't about you. This is not about you. This is about those who are at a bigger risk of dying. And by you being careless, essentially you are putting them at risk. In the first study circle, I did mention from a fiqh perspective, if the Wali al-Amr, if there is an order from the government, the leader of the state, that doesn't contradict the core principles of our deen, the fuqaha say that it is wajib to follow that ruling. So when we are told you must stay at home, there's nothing un-Islamic about that. It is wajib for us to uphold those regulations. And I don't think a lot of people take it seriously. And I did mention to a few of you people, right? I was asked to lead one of the 5 people from my streets have passed away. More people have passed away in my masjid. There was one instance where I went to lead the funeral prayer. And only then it registered with me how big this thing is. Only 10 people were allowed to enter the graveyard. Okay, only 10 people were allowed to enter the graveyard. So you had someone from council counting the people. You had the family members, right, of the deceased person, and every single person was scared to touch the coffin. Every single person was keeping a distance. You see, when someone dies, there's sadness. But it adds to the sadness when there's no closure, when there's no ending to that demise. No one wants to end, no one wants to leave this world in that manner, where everyone is scared to touch your coffin. That's not how you envisage it. The son whose father died, he told me that his father had persistent symptoms. And the last time he saw his father was when he was being carried into the ambulance. And he wasn't sure how serious this was. 5 days later, he passed away. He couldn't see him. He could not speak to him. So please do not take this lightly. It's not about you. You may survive this, but it's about those people whose lives depend on how well you isolate yourselves. So that is one thing. Also, in the masjid, or the people that passed away over here, because I knew them for so many years, they were quite literally father figures for me. I would look at them as my father. And that's the role they would play. And seeing them pass away, right? Never before have I ever woken up, looked at my parents, and said, Alhamdulillah, you are alive. When 5 people die from your street, you do that. Being thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just for them being alive. That's not something I would do every single day. And it points towards a bigger point, that sometimes it takes extreme tribulations to attain this level of thankfulness, where you thank Allah just that your parents are alive. And maybe it is in this that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased. So yeah, that's please do take this seriously. The last thing, and just essentially 3 more minutes that I'm going to take, is Ramadan. Is Ramadan. Okay. There is only one verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Ramadan. And he describes the month of Ramadan. Okay. So he says, Shahr Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. It is the month in which the Quran came down. In the own words of God, he describes the month of Ramadan as the month of the Quran. What is significant of here is Allah doesn't describe it as the month of fasting. لم يقل سبحانه وتعالى شهر رمضان الذي تصومون فيه. He doesn't say this is the month in which you fast. The primary description of Ramadan by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that this is the month of the Quran. But fasting comes later. So what makes Ramadan special isn't the fasting. What makes Ramadan special is the Quran. And therefore this month has to be all about the Quran. It has to be all about the Quran. There are 2 types of connections and attachments that I feel we can have with Ramadan. And I categorize this as you could either have an emotional attachment, or you could have something I call a spiritual connection with Ramadan. You see, an emotional attachment is very easy to develop. What an emotional attachment is, that when you look at Ramadan, you think about the iftar, the gatherings, you think about the food, you think about that vibe that is around Ramadan. That is an emotional attachment with Ramadan. It's very easy to develop that. What is harder is that spiritual attachment, where when you think about Ramadan, the thing that excites you about Ramadan isn't the food. It's actually that this month is the month where I will bridge a closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You look at Ramadan as an opportunity to come closer to Allah. That is a spiritual connection. In this day and age, a lot of people have an emotional attachment with Ramadan, not a spiritual attachment. So let's try and refine our intentions of that as well. And I'm a shahid to this, I know this. A lot of people say, when they look at Ramadan, they say, this is the month in which I'm going to lose weight because I'm fasting. Now, it's a separate tragedy that they don't lose weight, they only end up gaining weight. But you see how, when it comes to Ramadan, we see this as an opportunity, as not attaining a closeness to Allah, but other things. That is what I mean by an emotional attachment to the month of Ramadan. So let this month please be a month in which we build. It should be the month of the Quran. The last thing that I will say before I pass it on is, often we hear people say, you should finish 1 khatam in the Quran, or you should recite 30 ajza. First of all, there's nothing substantial in any of the books that says you must finish 1 Quran in the month of Ramadan. The more Quran you recite, the better it is. But understand that it would be far better, that instead of reciting 30 chapters in the month of Ramadan, you recite 5 chapters that you actually understand. When Allah sent us the Quran, He told us, He said, Kitabun anzalnahu mubarakun liyadabbaru. He said, the purpose that I'm giving you this book is that you reflect over the Quran. You reflect upon the verses of the Quran. Now, how do you reflect on something that you don't understand? How do you reflect on something that is just simply words, alien words, foreign words? So let's let's remove our focus from simply reciting the Quran excessively and start to pay attention on knowing what we recite. Contemplation. Contemplation will only come when we recite the Quran, but we know what we are reciting. So if you have to cut down on the amounts that you recite, but the small portion that you do recite, please do make sure that you know what you are reciting, pick up a tafsir, a translation, and truly try and ponder upon what the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are saying to you. And when you understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to you, only then will the Quran have an impact upon you. Only then will you see that the Quran is triggering a change in you. Thank you very much. I think over these 4 sessions, on average, we've had about 24 people join. And even if one person, I mean, ideally more than one person, but even if one person has benefited or learnt more about the fiqh of fasting as a result of these circles, then it was absolutely worth the time and the effort. And also, I may be the one who's sitting before the camera speaking to you and answering your questions, but there are people behind the scenes that are just as important, that work so hard. So if these circles have benefited you, please make it a point to tell those people who are behind the scenes working so hard to make this possible, that you appreciate their time and their effort. And I have no doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate rewarder of your efforts, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you in tenfolds. That is it from me, inshallah. And if I can ask Sister Farhat for her words.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to everyone. I pray that you're in the best of health and iman. I always do a quick reminder in terms of my role as the Muslim chaplain. I know since COVID-19 has happened and many of you have gone back home or are in temporary accommodation and can't get back home quite yet. You are working online, you have assessments, you have exams, you may not have them, they may be delayed. Please know that the university is open, it's operating, all the services are up and running, be it online. There may still be questions that you need answers to, there still may be assessments, exams that you need clarification on, there may be mitigation that you need to submit. Please clarify from your faculties, from your schools, just to get that information. If everything is running smoothly, then alhamdulillah, but I know there are many students who still have questions and queries, so please get that checked. And if I can assist or help, please just get in touch. The mental health services, counselling, myself as a chaplain, we're all here to support, have conversations. Being at home also may have opened up new challenges for people. In addition to boredom, there may be pain, trials, tribulations that have become more magnified. And if there are conversations about home and spirituality, those type of trials, then I'd be more happy to have those discussions over the next few weeks. And I want to just thank the Islamic Society and Abdus-Saalaam for re-inviting me for this final session as well. I begun with the first reminder, and my theme was gratitude, and I specifically picked gratitude because I have my own love affair with the word. I feel like a grateful heart beautifies everything. I think a grateful heart has the ability to change nearly all interactions and relationships with people into something that has purity and goodness in it. And I'll just very quickly just go back to week 1, week 2, week 3 in terms of what I covered thematically. So in week 1, I went over how important gratitude is for each Muslim and its value. And currently looking at the situation with coronavirus, how grateful we should be as well in terms of what we have and what we're not putting other people, what we have and how we're saving other lives as well in terms of staying at home. It's a very difficult thing when you think your liberties have been taken from you. but it's also in terms of safeguarding human life as well. And that is something to be grateful for. Abdus-Saalaam touched on this, but you have the capability of actually saving lives. So please take heed of that. In week 2, I looked at how many of us will be going through challenges and trials and tribulations. And a big part of being grateful for me within this structure is having the highest opinion of Allah Azza wa Jal. Because if you don't have a very strong opinion of your Lord, how will you be grateful? The more effort you build into strengthening your relationship with Allah, the more you trust Him, the more you talk to Him, it automatically results in you having the best and highest opinion of Him, even at times of difficulty, even when you don't understand the hikmah of what is going on. You know that He loves you and He only wants what's best for you. And in week 3, I covered a believer, and when we make mistakes and when we make when we commit sins as well, how does that person, how does that individual go back to gratitude as a means of getting closer to Allah, knowing that they have probably harmed their relationship? And I listed many of Allah Azza wa Jal's favors upon us, and those favors for me extensively looked at opportunities for ibadat. So the fact that we have Shaban, the fact that we can fast on Monday and Thursday, the fact that we have the days of Dhul Hijjah, that we have Jummah, that we have a special time on the day of Jummah where our du'as will be accepted, the fact that we can give out sadaqah and it veils us from calamity, and repeatedly the opportunities come and come and come again for the sinner to repent, to seek for forgiveness. So how can the heart not be grateful? So now we're on the final week. And I thought, do I pick a brand new topic or do I go back to gratitude? And Abdus-Saalaam said that there was one verse in the Quran and it talks about Ramadan. And I talked about this verse on the very first session. And I'll just read the verse out. And I'm really sorry, I know it's late. I'll try to be quick. So the verse is in English. Bismillah. The month of Ramadan is that in which was revealed the Quran, a guidance for the people and clear proofs of guidance and criterion. So whoever sights the new moon of the month, let him fast it. And whoever is ill or on a journey, then an equal number of other days. Allah intends for you ease and does not intend for you hardship, and wants for you to complete the period and to glorify Allah for that which He has guided you. And perhaps you will be grateful. And it was this word that drew me. Perhaps you will be grateful. The month of Ramadan is imminent now. It's like days away. And what are we grateful for? So I listed some other things. I am grateful for the ability to fast. Inshallah, I am grateful that I have physical and mental health so that I can fast. I'm grateful for the food that's on my plate. I'm grateful for the roof over my head. I'm grateful for the knowledge and the ilm to recite and pray my Salah. I'm grateful for the tawfiq that I may have a car or I'll have transport to get to study circles or to a masjid. I am very grateful that Ramadan means that I will be in congregation, I'll be in Jamaat with others. I'm grateful that I have rizq and I have money to share and to give to the poor. I'm grateful that I have internet connection so that I can actually be sat in this study circle. I'm grateful that I have the ability to concentrate and focus and acquire Islamic knowledge that I shouldn't take for granted. I'm grateful that every Ramadan there's a drive in me that wants to improve year on year. I'm grateful that I actually have Iman and that for some reason Allah has gifted me with Iman for my whole life. I'm grateful that I'm part of the blessed Ummah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the seal of the Prophets, and we are one of his followers. I am grateful that inshallah that intercession will be sought by him, inshallah. I'm grateful that I have been gifted Hidayat, and Hidayat means guidance. And the list goes on and on and on. But it's the last few things that I just want to touch on in terms of gratefulness. And this is related to Hidayat, Iman, Ilm, our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being part of the Ummah of Hazur Pak Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And I just want to spend a minute on this because usually when we give thanks, we're often giving thanks for material goods that are considered gifts of gratitude, and they seem to be temporary, so they can be taken away from us. So things like income, house, job, these things. So when we know something is fragile, we tend to work harder to keep it. And the spiritual gifts, often we take this for granted. And I just want us to please take a moment to really appreciate that these are equally, if not more important, as objects of gratitude that are very, very temporary. Many such things cannot be taken for granted. And I particularly looking at Hidayat, guidance. None of us are promised or guaranteed that we will have Iman in a month's time, in 2 months' time, in a year's time. And none of us are promised that when we will pass away, that we will have the opportunity to recite the kalima. Often, like now what is happening with COVID-19, we are exposed to the temporariness of life, and we know that these things happen. Despite knowing this, we still don't understand the fragility of Iman or Hidayat. Hidayat is not your haq, nor is it your right. It is a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal that has an expiration date. We don't know when that is. And if you have been given it, please use it wisely. Sadly, in my job, I have been in situations where I have been sat face to face with a born Muslim person who has along the way in their life found it very difficult to utter the words of the kalima because too many things have happened and they have lost belief. And that is a very haunting truth, that just because you're born in Islam, just because you've been granted hidayat, just because at one point you've reverted to Islam, that this will be the end of your story. This is not the case. Many of us have been around misguided souls. We may have been a misguided soul ourselves, and we realize the sorry state that that is for those individuals. However, a grateful heart will only receive more good if it is sincere. So please, please be mindful and conscious of the fact that if we are using and utilizing Ramadan to make our hearts grateful, consider these spiritual gifts as being a godsend and things that will offer you salvation. And there's just one or two little ayahs that I want to refer back to from the Quran, just to make us reflect before I finish. So Surah 34, verse 13. And few of my servants are truly grateful. This scares me because who are the few? Rumi, I don't know if people like Rumi, but I quite liked his quote. And he said, wear gratitude like a cloak and it will feed every corner of your life. And then in Surah 14, verse 7, very short ayah, if you are grateful, and this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying this, if you are grateful, I will give you more. So this concludes my series of gratitude, and I think the ultimate thing that I am most grateful for is that I can say the shahadat. I know God is my savior, I know He's my best friend, and I pray inshallah that this relationship continues to blossom and strengthen, and that I can facilitate this love for others as well. And I pray that we are gifted hearts that are more grateful, and that these hearts inshallah are bound in connection to God always, inshallah. And I pray that it's a love that is always pure and clean, that is altruistic for us as well, and that we are sincere in our intentions. I just want to send a very short a note of appreciation and thanks once again to ISOC for their tireless efforts this year, from the summer to now, the classes, the charity campaigns, the social campaigns, the reminders, the halakas, the iftars, for Abdus-Saalaam continually offering his support and help with the classes as well in terms of knowledge and sharing teaching as well. And I also want to say, from my point of view, I've been very, very humbled and blessed to mentor many of you. So if I can continue in any way over the next few weeks and days, please do get in touch. And I would be more than happy to help. I pray that all of you have a blessed Ramadan, inshallah. I pray that it's filled with goodness and barakah. I pray that in our own unique way, we can bring the masjids to our homes this year, and we can make our homes shine with God's remembrance. And I pray that it can truly be the month of the Quran for all of us. God bless you all. Forgive me for falling short in any way, and I'm really sorry I've dragged on this circle for another 20 minutes. So God bless you all. Jazakumullah khair. Fahad, it might be you now.
Yeah. Okay. Jazakallah khair. Yeah. Jazakallah khair, Baji, and Jazakallah khair, Abdus-Saalaam, for all the continued efforts over the past 4 weeks, as well as all the stuff that you guys had to do during term time. That does conclude the end of this series. There's a message that I'm sending now. It has a couple links. The top link is a reminder that Abdus-Saalaam wanted to deliver today, but as you can probably see if you look at the clock, it's getting quite late. So if you just listen to that, I think it's 10-15 minutes. It's a quick reminder from Abdus-Saalaam. You can listen to that, inshallah, and gain some benefit. The second link is just, you guys are amazing. You have been sending notes to Abdus-Saalaam, your own notes, and we've just compiled them all together now into one big document. So if you haven't been listening for the past 3 weeks, you can still benefit from those notes. They're very comprehensive, and inshallah they'll be of benefit to you. The last link is just feedback. If you could do that, that would be greatly appreciated. This message will be sent on the WhatsApp chats as well. So for the people that left early, they'll get them as well, inshallah. Quick last note from me. Jazakumullah khairan to all of you for giving your time and effort to A, use the services we're offering, but B, to actually, actively engage, actively make our services useful. A service is only as useful as its users make it. And subhanAllah, it's very humbling, very gratifying as an ISOC to see that, people appreciate services like this and want to use services like this. So thank you deeply from everyone in ISOC for, contributing and using the services. I think I'll leave it there for now. Jazakallah khair once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.